introduction. The presentation is about electoral reform, and I'd like to mention here that prior to 2006, Father David Arms, Jonathan Frankel, and myself were preparing a paper on electoral reform because we had some kind of a consensus about the need for a proportional system, some element of a list system, and basically the ideas that I'm going to discuss here. I think there will be some differences between Father David Arms and myself, but I think it's good for people to look at different alternatives. So the proposal that I'm putting up here is for a system where votes will have equal value, which is the kind of things everybody understands. Every vote will count, doesn't matter where it is cast, which constituency, so nobody's vote is wasted. And so the list element, which I think will be of great interest to people who want gender representation in Parliament, highly ranked candidates are likely to be elected in the system. So let me just get going on that. The outline, I'll first of all give a very brief overview of the weaknesses of the 97 alternatives vote system. There's lots of stuff written on this. There's quite a lot of stuff on my website, which I will refer to at the end. People can go and look at them. I'll give an outline of my current proposal for the electoral reform and a way forward for voter education, which I'm sure CCF will be very interested in. Weaknesses of the 97 system, essentially, I had written something in 1996 when I was in Parliament, even before the Constitution was approved by Parliament. And essentially I said that the Reeves report was absolutely sound principles, but the only weakness it had was on the electoral system. And I'm afraid many of the things which I was afraid of has come to pass in the 99 election, the 2001 and 2006. And all those articles are there on my website. So the website is called Narsi on Fiji. So if you Google it, page will come up, and you just go to the politics page and just click on politics, and all of my articles which I've written since before '96, will all appear, and you can download anything that you want. So the summary of the weakness is that under the AV system, to win in any constituency, you need to have 50% of the votes or more, either on the first count or after preferences of losing candidates are counted. Which means essentially that if candidates do not win on the first count, the smaller parties are always eliminated, and their preferences are passed on to the larger parties, who in the end get more than their proportionate share of seats. Results are extremely disproportional, and it's also turned out to be exactly like that in this recent Queensland elections I referred to briefly yesterday. So what you end up with is whatever Reeves Commission may have thought about parties collaborating with each other and bargaining, etc., none of that had any impact on moderation before the election. In fact, what happened was the large parties, instead of cooperating with other parties, they tended to put their competitors last on their preferences, and they even put parties who were diametrically opposed to their ideologies and views right up at the top to avoid giving their preferences to the opponents. So far from having cooperation, it led to the opposite, confrontational politics during the election time. And of course, when people did get elected, they dominated the parliament, then you had confrontational politics in parliament as well. And that happened in '99, it happened in 2001, and I think the first time it was beginning to work in 2006, and the experiment was cut short. So in this system, of course, also what happens is that votes of small losing parties and votes of voters who voted for losing parties are simply wasted, because it has no impact on Parliament, and that is a fundamental flaw in the system that we have had. And of course, we've all talked about the fact that when you've got communal constituencies where voters of one ethnicity can only vote for candidates of that one ethnicity, then it reinforces a service ethos, where people only serve their own ethnic groups, and it is very, very undesirable in Fiji. So there are other operational problems, because I think we totally confused voters by having this above the line and below the line things. Quite often, preferences were given to political parties and they were taken away from voters, although voters could have had the option of ranking people themselves. But by having this above the line easy option, it stopped voters from thinking critically, about who they would like their preferences to go to. So there are operational problems in the way we structured the ballot paper on that. And I have looked at all of these things, and the electoral system I am proposing, hopefully, will have none of these weaknesses. Registration issues, I think that many of these will be resolved by electronic registration. Please keep in mind that electronic registration does not necessarily imply that you're going to have electronic counting. Please keep that in mind. That's a very big distinction. Electronic counting, is a very worrisome concept, whereas electronic registration is not. Right? So when we get to that stage where people are beginning to talk about how you're going to count votes, I think it'd be a very good idea for people in Fiji to have little hard pieces of paper, to count and put into boxes and piles, rather than little electronic votes going mysteriously into people's candidates' boxes. And anything can happen over there, I think, as electronic experts know. Okay, so what are the objectives of a new electoral system? Based on our experiences since 1970, there's reasonable consensus about those of us, who've been writing on this subject, in Fiji, David Arms, Frankel, myself. There must be no ethnic categories for voting or candidature. Each person's vote must be of equal value, regardless of ethnicity or location, and of course, taken for granted age, gender, etc. Each person's vote must count, regardless of where it is cast, regardless of which constituency it's cast. Right? Every person's vote must count. It shouldn't be wasted. So the system which has all these attributes is a proportional system, which ensures that the number of candidate parliamentarians for each party is directly proportional to the proportion of total votes received throughout the country. That is the fundamental result that we want our system to achieve. And we can have a few little finer, tunings of this thing. But essentially, take any party, and if that party has 30% of all the votes in the country, they should be entitled to 30% of seats in parliament. You should not depart, too far from that kind of a proportionality. And the only departure I will recommend, and you'll see later on, is that we must also allow independents to come up. People should not have to get elected only through political parties. There are locations and things where very strong independent candidates can come up, and they should be given the right to contest and have their say, in parliament. And I think the system that I'm recommending allows independents to come through as well, and not have politics totally determined 100% by political parties. So there are two